Okay, welcome to this very brief lesson on analysis of variance, or very specifically one-way analysis of variance in SPSS. So what we have here is we have our grouping variable, or our essentially our independent variable, which is variable 1, okay, represented by this row of data right here, okay. And then we have this variable here, which is our dependent variable. I just sort of mocked up some data that range from essentially 0 to 100. I also made it so that the groups would be very different. If you start to look at the differences between groups 1, groups 2, groups 3, and groups 4, you'll realize that there are pretty big differences here. So the question now becomes, what do we want to do? How would we analyze this data? It's relatively straightforward. This is definitely not an advanced treatment of SPSS. This is just a very basic treatment of SPSS. Okay, so one of the things to do, let's do this first. Let me get rid of. Okay, so let's go over to analyze. Oh, I'm sorry, before we do that, let's take a quick look at the variable view. You'll notice that variable 1 that I called a grouping variable is automatically turned into a nominal variable because these are groups. So let's say that these groups represent 4 different ethnicities. Let's say that they represent 4 different geographic locations, 4 different anything that really comes to your mind. 4 different groups of ages, anything really. Okay. And that this represents, let's say, I don't know, age, who knows, as a continuous variable. Now, if that was the case, if this was age, and this was something like a geographic location, obviously we'd be looking for another variable that would explain that relationship, because it's a pretty spurious relationship between those two things. But if this was age and over here this was groups of age, that wouldn't make much sense. So in this situation, what we'll say is that we have, let's say, something like a satisfaction score, percent satisfaction score, and let's say over here we have ethnicity, 4 different groups of ethnicities. One of the things that we can do in variable view is we can create some values on variable 1, which let's call, let's change the name to ethnicity. And let's change variable to something like percent satisfaction on some rating scale. Okay, so that's what we'll call that. Back to the values, we want to create some values. So a value of 1, let's say, is Caucasian. Value of 2, let's say, is African American. Value of 3, let's call that Asian Pacific Islander. And let's call value 4 Native Citizen. Okay. Remember, I'm just sort of coming up with this as we move along. There's really no relationship or research question that I'm working on, but I guess what we're looking for, just as an example here, would be differences in this percent satisfaction based on 4 different ethnicities. You'd have to think more deeply about an example that would really make sense to you here. I haven't really thought through percent satisfaction. And in this situation, we don't really need to label anything because, we don't need to put in any values because we don't have any levels of this scale variable. If you notice, it's a scale or continuous or a ratio variable, perhaps. It may even be an ordinal variable in reality, because these are, let's say, actually no, let's definitely think of it as a scale variable, and say something like percent satisfaction means out of, a large number of questions, the number of questions that the people said they were satisfied with. I'm sure there's a much better example for what you could call these numbers that range from 0 to essentially 100. All right. But that's the silly little example that I'm working with right now. All right, so now that we have these in here and we've checked the level of the variable, then we're ready to analyze. So the analysis is pretty straightforward. Let's take a look. Right down here, we're going to go to one-way Anova. Click on one-way Anova. Let's just reset that really quickly and make sure we've got this right. The dependent variable would be this percent satisfaction, and the factor, okay, or the independent variable would be ethnicity. Okay, if we want to look at post hocs, we have to choose one post hoc test. Let's just go with a Bonferroni post hoc test. Okay, and because we're making multiple comparisons, let's raise this significance to 0.01. All right, let's raise our bar. There's a very specific way to make a Bonferroni adjustment at this significance level, which would be more advanced, and nothing that I'm going to go into right now. But just needless to say, I am going to increase that significance level because we're going to be making multiple comparisons. So I'm going to continue, and under options, I want to take a look at the descriptive statistics. That's really all I want to do for a very, very basic one-way Anova. Okay, so okay, and then we have our I'm going to delete this because I had a existing table. So this is our new data that we just got here. So what do we pay attention to? Okay, question is, what do we pay attention to here? This is what you would call your omnibus test. Okay, so you have good reason to believe that there are meaningful differences among these groups. Okay, these four groups, group 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if you're looking at the mean differences, they're pretty good sized mean differences up here. Okay, so that would then bring us down to our post hoc tests. Okay, we would want to take a look at our post hoc tests. So let's just scroll down a little bit, and I'll show you what I'm paying attention to. I'm paying attention to this significance level. What you're noticing is that there's significance right across the board. Okay, there will be some situations where these won't always be the case, but that means that when this group here, let's say the Asian Pacific Islander group, is contrasted against the Caucasian group, then we have a significance level. Then we have, significant results. Okay. Basically, that's just saying that there are meaningful differences among all of these groups. Okay. So this is the. Oh, I'm sorry. I made a little bit of a mistake. I circled the point 039, which would be contrasting Caucasian against African American. Okay, right over here. So you see you have these sort of significance levels that are associated with each one of these groups, contrasting one against the other. And because SPSS is pretty comprehensive, it's going to look at all of these things. So that's really just what to pay attention to. Again, this overall significance level, I'd pay attention to the means, and then these significance levels here, and then what these significance levels are actually saying in terms of the comparison among the different groups. Very straightforward exercise here.